Hello and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. This is part 2 of the Funkie Junkie Saturday Showcase. In this video, we're going to be creating some swatch cards using the Idea-ology index cards. If you'd like to find out which supplies I'm going to be using, go ahead and pause here. Also, I'm going to be doing a few technique cards revolving around the topic of distressed glazes. So let's head over to the Crafty Corner. To start today, we're going to be making some swatch cards. I got my hands on the new index file cards and they come in 3 different types. We have got ones with little tabs on them. We've got ones that make little booklets. We've got some regular cards and we've got some pockets. So I'm going to start with the ones that make the little booklets today, and we're going to be making a few swatch cards. We're going to be swatching out distressed glazes, archival inks, Ranger mediums, and distress glitters. To start with, let's alter the outside of these booklets. So to do that, I'm going to be doing a little bit of collage with some Idea-ology pieces, and I thought it'd be fun to dive into my washi tape collection. These marbled ones are from the latest Idea-ology release by Tim Holtz, and these are fantastic. I think these will make some really neat covers for our swatching pages. So I'm going to just start, and we're going to apply these on the back of the book and make a little bit of a tape collage. So I want to start with the blue, and if it hangs over the edge, that's okay. I can easily trim that off with the tonic snip scissors. So I'll just stick that down and start covering these sections. So 2 of them I think I'm going to be doing with the tape, and 2 I will do in a collage style. Ooh, I want to make a pattern. And I also have some tapes from older Idea-ology releases. I do not use washi tape nearly as much as I should, so this seemed like a really good way to use the collection. I don't know about you, but sometimes you collect stuff and you don't know what project to use it on, and then all of a sudden there's a perfect project for that one item that you've been hanging on to. One of my goals for this year is to use my stash. My stash is rapidly becoming a bit of a hoard, so I want to use the stuff up and feel great about using it. Because if I use things up, then that means I can get more new things when they come out. Okay, ooh, I am really liking this pattern that's coming out. That is pretty neat. Okay, just trim that off. There. All right, and I've got room for one more stripe with this one at the top. I think it's going to overhang just a little bit, but that is easily trimmed. There. Okay, so we'll just trim off the extra tape and move on to the next little booklet cover. I think we'll do one more washi tape cover, and then I'll switch over to some collaging. Also, I need to label each of these little booklets. While I was getting all my materials set up today, I stumbled across my label maker. So I've also typed out some label stickers to add to the booklets. Okay, let's see. So these are the labels that I made. I think I'm going to put the mediums in this one, and I will do the archival inks in the other. And these two I'll put on the collaged covers. Okay, so closing up the little booklet. Looks good. This label is definitely too big, but not a problem. I can just take the scissors and give it a little trim and splice the sticker into 2 pieces. All right, I'll just peel this and stick it onto the cover. Okay, there we go. Oh, not quite centered. Still not centered. Let's try that one more time. Much better. Okay, so I'm going to put the second one of these little booklets on fast forward as we add some more washi tape. Here is our second finished mini folio. So I've got my label on here, and we used some of the new marbled Idea-ology tape, and I also have some of the older Idea-ology, and it's got a little ruler on it, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the next part, and we're going to collage a couple of these. So for collaging, I decided to pull some of the journaling cards, and I've got 2 sets, so I've got matching ends for each side of these cards. So we're just going to grab some collage medium, and I'm going to adhese that down, and then I'll just trim off the excess, and then I'll go back in with some little ephemera bits and do a collage. So let's grab some collage medium. I'm just gonna use the bottle. Actually, wait a minute. I think I have a open jar of collage medium that will work even better. So just take that, and I'll scoop some out off to the side. Okay, and just put that down here. And I'll put a little bit of that over here. All right, so I'm just going to spread that around. Probably got a bit more than I actually need, but that's okay. I will smoosh that onto the other card if there's excess. Now, you definitely could go in with a paintbrush if you don't want to use your finger. I just find it goes a little bit faster if I'm using my finger for this. All right, scoop the extra off, put it over here. Good. Okay, now I'm just going to take this and I'm going to place that on here. Keep that closed. Line it up. Good. And I'll just press down. Okay, and I'll set this aside, let that dry a little bit, and I will work on the other card. Okay. All right, scraping the extra off, setting that aside on the other card. Smush that around. All right, and let's put down the other piece. Let's see. That should be good. All right, I'll just press that down on here, smooth it out. Okay, good. And I'll set that aside as well. All right, coming back to our first card. That looks pretty good. So I'll just give that front cover a quick trim, and we'll flip it over and add our back cover. All right, that's one side. Now the other. Okay, flipping that over. Now we'll add this. All right, let's get some collage pieces. Here are the completed mini file folders. So we have 2 that are collaged and 2 that I have covered in washi tape. Let's go ahead and start with Distress Glaze swatching. So to do that, I'm going to be using the Distress embossing pen, and I'm going to be bringing in the entire set of glazes. And I'll set these aside and we'll pull from the bin as we swatch these out on the card. So quickly, I'm just going to sort these into some sort of rainbow order, and then we will start swatching them out on the card. What I'm going to do for the swatches is to put down a bit of embossing ink. I'm just going to make a little swatch here, and then I will sprinkle on the powder. Not a lot, since it's just a very small corner being embossed. And then we'll just tap the extra right back into the jar. There, pretty simple, and then I'll give it a quick blast with the embossing tool. Now that this is embossed, I'm also going to give it a quick label. So I'm just going to grab a pencil and we're going to label that. This is Kitsch Flamingo. Because the swatches are going to be so small, it's going to be easier for me to do some hand labeling with these. All right, just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and swatch the rest of these out, and we will put this portion on fast forward. Here is our finished swatch booklet for the Distress Glazes. So I have each of them labeled in pencil, and we have our mini swatch. So we can go ahead and set this one aside. Now, let's take a look at the Distress Ranger mediums. For these, I'm going to be taking a palette knife, and we're going to put a bit of a smear on each side for the different mediums. We have got 8 different mediums that we're going to be swatching out. I'm also going to add a strip of ink on one side once these mediums have dried to compare and contrast with and without additives. Okay, first we have the Distress Texture Paste, and this is the Opaque. We just need a little bit to scrape, just like that. And I'll try to leave some space in between so that I can label these. Next, I will switch to the Translucent Texture Paste. That would be this one. Quickly wipe off the scraper. Get a little bit of this medium, and we'll make a line. There, just like that. Next, let's take a look at the Grit Paste. We'll start with Opaque and then switch over to Translucent. And a little bit of Grit Paste. And we'll smear that across here. Need a little bit more. Good. And switching to the transparent. Smush that across. Okay, that looks good. Now moving over to the other side, we're going to be looking at Crackle Paste. I'll start with the Opaque Crackle Paste, and we'll switch over to Translucent after. Now, I wanted to get these swatches done pretty early because they're going to need a bit of time to dry. So after I have all of these swatched out, we will switch over to the Archival ink swatches and come back to this later. All right, moving the Crackle Paste. All right, that looks pretty good. Switching it up to Translucent. Now, the interesting thing about these mediums, each of the mediums has a slightly different viscosity. Some of them are really thin, others are thick, and some fall in between. Okay, there's the Translucent Crackle. Now let's switch over to Crackle Paint. That's this one. This is probably the thinnest and lightest medium that we have. As we can see, it's really, really thin. It's like lighter than the consistency of honey. Okay, so let's take that and we'll spread that over here. Kind of slippery. It doesn't really want to stay on the palette knife too well. Each medium is just a little bit different, but that's what makes this interesting. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do is a little bit of Frosted Crystal. Now, Frosted Crystal isn't a spreadable medium. It's a embossing powder, but because of what it does once it's set, I wanted to put it over here with the different textures. Okay, so grabbing the embossing pen, I'm going to draw a few lines here and then sprinkle on frosted crystal. I'm going to have to be really careful with this not to get it into the other mediums. There, I just sprinkle it just like that. In theory, I should be able to tap this off without getting that into anything else. Okay, good. Now I need to quickly heat the frosted crystal and try not to blast anything else with heat while I'm doing that. Okay, be back in just a second after we've heated frosted crystal. Okay, here are the texture pastes. So I'm going to go ahead, set this aside and let it dry, and then we'll come back and add some ink over these swatches, and I will label these as well. Down here we have frosted crystal. It doesn't look like much yet, but once we add some ink, it's going to do something pretty cool. Okay, let's go ahead and set that aside to dry. Now we're going to go in and we're going to be working with some of the Distress Archival inks. And for that, I'm going to be doing some very simple swatching. We're going to be using this teeny tiny brush stroke flower stamp, and then I will go through all of the inks and label them. But first, let's just go ahead and get a feel for the size of this little stamp. So I'm starting off with Picked Raspberry. Okay, nice and simple. Let's go ahead and put the rest of this on fast forward. Here is the completed swatch booklet for Distress Archival inks. So we'll go ahead and set this one aside, and we're now going to work on Distress glitters. I've also decided to throw in Distress mica at the same time because it really fits in this category. So on the inside, I'm going to start with a swatch of Distress glitter completely unaltered. We're going to put this one at the top, and then I'm going to show you how it looks altered and some of the other fun variants that have come out. Okay, so I'm going to put the Distress glitter right here. I'm using the embossing pen, and then I'm going to use Ranger sticky embossing powder so that I have a smooth method to lay down the Distress glitter. We'll do the first swatch in real time, and then I'll switch over to fast forward. Okay, we have some of the embossing ink down. Now I'll add the sticky embossing powder. We have a nice little swatch space right there. Put the rest of this back into the jar. I'll be back in just a moment after I've heat set this. Now the tricky thing with the sticky embossing powder, as soon as it's heat set, we need to move very quickly to get the Distress glitter on. We won't have a lot of time to move things around. So I'm going to have my jar off to the side. I'm going to quickly heat this, and then we will add some glitter. Quickly dumping that on, tapping it off. There we go. We have our basic glitter swatch. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the rest of this right back into the jar. The first swatch, we're just looking at Distress glitter completely unaltered. So let's go ahead and give that a label. I'm just going to grab a pencil. So we have Distress glitter. Okay, and I'll just tap off the extra. That looks good, nice and sparkly. All right, let's go ahead and put this next part and fast forward as I go through and add some other glitters. As a little bit of a preview, these are distressed glitters altered with a little bit of alcohol ink. These are specialty distressed glitters that were released during the holidays. We've got Tinsel and Garland. We have the Nightfall glitter from Halloween, and this is an old one. We've got Vintage Platinum. That's a fun one to use as well. And then on this page, when we jump into the micas, we've got the traditional mica flakes. We've got the Halloween Midnight mica flakes. And these are some altered mica flakes that I colored with alcohol inks. Okay, let's go ahead and put this on fast forward. Here is the completed swatch card for the Distress Micas and the Distress Glitters. So these are pretty messy and I do not want these little samples contaminating each other. So I'm going to be inserting a little slip of paper to keep them separate. I'm just going to flip this over. I've already added a couple of holes in the back and I'm just going to attach this using some staples. Just pushing that through, and over here, just gonna press those little prongs down, just like that. And I will do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and pushing the prongs down. There. Now I have a nice little booklet, and I've got my glitters and micas separated so we won't have anything sticking to the other side. Now I'm just going to quickly trim off the little bit of excess on the top, and we will move on to the final folder. So we had already started on the Distress mediums, but those needed a little bit of time to dry. So let's go ahead and pull those back in. I'm also going to be using some of the Distress re-inkers to better highlight what these mediums are actually doing. So these are all nice and dry. We've got texture paste at the top, opaque and translucent, moving down to the grit paste. Then we got the crackle paste. I also have the distress paint, and we had some of the frosted crystal embossing powder. Okay, I'm just going to grab a water brush and we're going to add some color to these. So to make it easy, I'm just going to use one color. And today, since we have the outside in blue, I'm going to be using Prize Ribbon. So we'll just run that across here, and we can see that the texture paste is really absorbent and just wicks in the color that we've added. Okay, let's see how the translucent texture paste works. That is more like a resist. So we've got color down, but then if we go in and dab that off, that doesn't really stick to the texture paste. It acts as a resist. So we've got color around and like a little bit of tinting on it, but for the most part, it resists color additives. All right, moving on to the grit paste. Grit paste, just like the texture paste in Opaque, grabs onto the color and absorbs it. So just adding that in, we now have some lovely blue texture. All right, how about the translucent grit paste? This one is also absorbent. We can add color to this, but it gives a different look. It seems to be a little bit more intense. Okay, moving on to the other side. Let's take a look at the Opaque Crackle Paste. So we'll add this over the top. Now ideally this should be seeping into the cracks in between. I'm going to take a cloth, wipe some of that off. If I wet the edge of the cloth, it should lift a little. Yep. And we can see that the color has absorbed in between the cracks. That's giving us a really neat effect. All right, now how about the transparent? This is going to act also like a resist, similar to the translucent grit paste, texture paste. Now, if we go back in with a cloth, we're going to lift the color, and we're going to find that the color has settled between the cracks in the texture paste. Yep. More color in between. And it's shiny too, which gives it a neat effect. All right, how about the Distress Crackle Paint? This is going to be pretty similar to the Crackle Paste, but the primary difference is going to be that the paint has finer cracks than the Crackle Paste. So we've added our color. Let's go ahead and lift a little bit of that off. And again, we can see that the color has gone in between the fine little crackle lines. Here we have big crackles, and here we've got little crackles. All right, last one. Let's go in and see what the Frosted Crystal does. This neatly absorbs the medium. I love using this particularly for paper dolls. It makes coloring easy and gives medium something to grip onto. So bring that in. There we go. All right, let's move on and start working on some technique cards. The technique cards that I'm going to be working on are going to be involving glazes and mediums. So here is our first technique card. I decided to cut up a bunch of different backgrounds that I had laying around, and I'm going to be using these as foundations for these little technique cards. And all of these are done with Distress ink, and they just have some different features on them. But let's set those aside and jump right into the actual technique. So I'm going to grab the card, put down some scrap paper, and I decided to go with the bubble stencil THMS 138. To start with, we're going to be using some texture paste. I'm going to open that up, and we're going to put a little bit of that through the stencil, and then we will start to add the Distress glazes. Okay, I think I'm just going to do kind of a triangle from corner to corner. Just like that. That'll give us a good space to work with. So I'm just going to smush that in. Make sure that we've got good coverage. All right. That looks good. Next, I will go in with the glazes, and we will add some color. So setting that aside, wiping off the palette knife. Moving this over just a little bit, and I'll scrape off the extra texture paste, and we'll put that right back in the jar. Okay, now let's go in with our Distress glazes. For colors, I decided to use Salty Ocean, Salvaged Patina, and Twisted Citron. So I'm just going to put this right here, and I'll open up the Distress glazes, and we're just going to sprinkle a little bit around, and then we'll wait and see how it looks after we emboss. So I'm just taking a little pinch of Twisted Citron, twisting with fingers to put it onto the paper. Going in with Salty Ocean next. I'm going pretty light on that. That's a very bold color. And then we'll finish off with some Salvaged Patina. I think I might need just a little bit more of that. Okay. And then we'll just move that powder around, make sure that we've got good coverage. You can always go back in and add more color. Want to make sure that the distress powder gets everywhere. Want to have good color with that glaze. Okay, we've bounced that around pretty good. I think I'm happy with the result. All right, so we'll go ahead and set this one aside, and we'll come back in about 20 to 30 minutes to check on the progress. It's a bit more humid here in Quebec, so I find that anything with mediums takes slightly longer to dry. Okay, so we'll set that aside. We'll cap our glazes back up. Next, we're going to turn to Crackle Paste. I'm going to be starting with the Crackle Paste Opaque first. And we're going to be using stencil THMS 036. And we'll use this background. I'm going to start from the opposite corner this time. We'll get our Crackle Paste opened. Take a scoop of that. And I'm going to work from this corner downward. Just like that. Now, as you're using the texture paste, you're going to notice different viscosities and different drying times. I find that the texture paste matte dries the fastest out of the mediums. The Crackle Paste Opaque is probably the second fastest drying, and the translucents seem to dry just a little bit slower. So we want to work fairly quickly when adding our mediums. Okay, that looks good. Set that aside. This time for colors, I'm going to be using Candied Apple, Picked Raspberry, and Villainous Potion. I might even throw in a little Salty Ocean, but let's see how these colors look first. All right, so grab that, sprinkle a little bit of Villainous Potion, then we'll go in with the Candied Apple, and a dash of Picked Raspberry. Okay, we'll lift this up, tap it a little bit, and see if I need to add more color in places, which looks like I do. Okay, go in with a little bit more of the red, a dash more Villainous Potion. I absolutely love this part of this particular technique. It's so fun to just drop colors in. It's a little bit like finger painting and kind of crossed with sand painting. So this brings back some fun childhood memories. Okay, looks good. And we'll set this one aside to dry as well. Okay, clean off our surface. And next, for the last technique card in this batch, we're going to be working with translucent grit paste Crackle. For this one, I'm going to be using stencil THMS 032. This is definitely one of my favorite stencils, and as you can tell, I've used it quite a bit. All right, it's going to take a second. I'm going to put a cap back on some of my mediums so I don't accidentally get other ingredients in them. And quickly put lids on distress glazes. Knowing me, if I don't, I will knock them over while reaching for something else. Okay, so for this color combo, we're going to be pulling in Wilted Violet, Wild Honey, a dash of mustard seed, and perhaps a little bit of Salty Ocean. All right, getting our Crackle Paste. Got that. And this one I'm going to do right down the middle of the card, just to change it up a little. All right, put the extra back into the jar. Okay, we'll set this aside. And let's get the stencil off. Lifting it up. Perfect. Okay, wipe up the little bit of extra that got in the way. Now let's go ahead and add our colors. Wilted Violet, Wild Honey, Fossilized Amber, and Salty Ocean. I'm going to start with just a touch of Salty Ocean, just for a little bit of contrast up in the corner. Then we'll go in with the Wilted Violet. And down here, I definitely want lots of the Glazed Honey and the Fossilized Amber. This time, I'm kind of trying to follow the color pattern. Oh, I need to add some picked raspberry. There's that little corner of pink up here. Definitely want that. A little bit more Wilted Violet. Okay, that looks good. Let's move this around and see where I need to add any extra. Okay, just a little bit of extra over here and here. Oh, and I missed a spot. Good. Okay, and we'll set this aside and we'll be back in about 25 minutes or so. Okay, we're back. Let's take a look at what we have so far with our embossing glaze technique cards. So this is the first one that we did with texture paste. Not much change. And here's one of the ones that we did with Crackle Paste. As we can see, the opaque Crackle Paste has started to crack very nicely over here. So we'll need to set that aside and heat emboss that momentarily. And here is the one with the translucent Crackle Paste. The crackle on here is much more subtle, but I suspect that we're going to see a lot more crackle once we start to heat emboss this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this on fast forward while we heat emboss and see what our results are. Okay, let's take a look at our results. Here is the Distress Glaze over texture paste. This looks really great. We have raised bubbles here and we have the beautiful gradient left by the Distress Glazes. There's a little bit of orange peel effect going on here, but that adds some nice texture to the result. So I will go ahead and label that over here. Distress Glazes over texture paste. Okay, so that is our first card. Let's set that aside here. Now let's take a look at the Distress Crackle Paste. Here it is. We've got Distress Glazes over Crackle Paste, and we've got this wonderful shattered look. It's kind of like broken glass. It looks really cool. Maybe a little bit more like broken ceramic since it's more opaque in the background. Okay, we'll give this one a label. Distress Glazes over translucent. Nope, this is the opaque texture paste. Crackle. Okay, I like these. These are going to be little reminders for me of techniques to use when I'm stuck and in a rut. All right, final card. This is the Distress Crackle Paste Translucent with Distress Glazes over the top. So we have a much more stained glass look window going on over here. We can still see the crackles, but we can also see what's underneath a little bit as well, which is really cool. And since we layered the glazes over light colors, we've intensified the colors of the glazes on top. Now for this one, I do want to go back in and add a little bit of Distress Crayon. The Distress Crayon is going to help bring a bit more attention to those little crackly bits. And to do that, I want to use the White Picket Fence Distress Crayon. And I'm just going to do that in one corner. I'm just going to do that up here. Just as a reminder of how we can bring those cracks out and make them pop a bit. Okay. Yep. That's just what I was looking for. All right, and I'll wipe off the extra. As we can see, by adding a little bit of Distress Crayon, we're able to highlight those crackly bits even more. So let's go ahead and give this one a label as well. Okay, and had to abbreviate since I ended up smudging a little bit of the glaze, but that is okay. These are just little reminders of techniques to use. So this brings us to the end of part 2 for the Idea-ology file cards and index box. Thank you so much for joining me for part 2 of the Funkie Junkie Saturday showcase. See you in a little bit in part 3, and until then, happy crafting.